Hello everyone, it's me again, and this is a little video on my watercolor journaling. I really like the Stillman and Burn beta series ones, and I like the paper in the Strathmore ones, which I'm about to show you, and they're the ones with the brown label on them. Both these brands of journal take a mixed media, water media, so look on the labels when you buy these. The beta series for the Stillman Burn and the Strathmore. I apologise for flipping the pages around because I have it on the horizontal and the vertical formats in a lot of these pictures. Sometimes I use pure watercolour, other times I will introduce a little bit of gouache to some of these. I try to be creative with these images. In this one I tinted the page with an orange acrylic first and then worked over with gouache and watercolour. The way I start these journals is I plan it with just a 2B pencil. I draw in what I want, and sometimes I do little vignettes in amongst the main body of the information, and then I'll go over usually with a fine tip marker, a black fine tip marker, and outline areas, but I make sure my line is a broken line, and I don't outline absolutely everything because a lot will come after the fact. I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but some of these are done in watercolour and gouache as the last two, and some are pure watercolour. You'll notice I use a little border around a lot of these images, and I think it just helps with the design. This one's an example of a little vignette or a couple of vignettes, as well as the main body of information. Sometimes I just do some kooky images like this one from the hotel room in Mont Blanc. You can paint whatever you want. These are just little glimpses of what your life is like when you travel. And they're sketches, but with colour and a little bit of watercolour. It's fun. Now a lot of these I'll actually work from my own photographs that I've taken during the day's excursion, and sometimes I will work on plein air, but these are just a great way of recording the adventures you have when you travel. And they don't have to be travelling overseas, they can be a day-to-day travelling even in your hometown. And these are still the Stillman and Burn watercolor journals in the beta series. They come in a lot of different series, but this one is an 8.5 by 5 inches, I believe, soft cover, and I open up so that I can use both pages for my paintings. Some of these are even here in the States, as that last one was. Some are in France or Spain, some are here in Austin where I live. All watercolour. And as I said, I do outline sometimes with the ink first before I actually paint, and other times I'll outline after I've done a watercolour sketch. It depends on how I feel. And it's up to you if you want to put a little side note of text about the day's excursion into the page as well. I like to sometimes write a few words, but that's totally a personal touch. You don't have to do that. And even with these little journal sketches, I still leave a lot of white of the paper showing. Now this next journal I'm going to show you is done with watercolour markers, and I use the Winsor & Newton markers. They have a fine tip on one end and they have more of a brush tip or a wider tip on the other end, and I use just a little water brush, and these are really handy to take when you're going overseas. So this one is done in a Strathmore watercolour journal, and they're all markers, not one skerrick of watercolour with a brush per se as you would normally use them. It's a little different. I might have to do a demo on how to use these markers because they are a little different. I like to put the markers down on the page first, just sort of block in my colours where I want them, and if I was doing a green, for instance, I would put a pale yellow down first and then introduce a green or a blue over the top of it, and then I use my brush to diffuse it, and they all merge together. So it's not as if you've got a palette beside your painting and being able to work from a palette. The paper becomes your palette. So that's how the markers differ. But you can get some very luminous colours with these. You just have to think about the way you use the colour. One colour over another to make your little nuances that you might get normally when you're painting with water and normal watercolours. Now I'm back to a Stillman & Byrne watercolour journal, and this is an 8x10 size. I really like this size. I can get a really large format going with these, and it's just a change. It's a nice change. I like to play around with the different sizes you can get. Square formats are nice too, but I don't think Stillman & Byrne make a square. I wish they did. Most of my images in this journal are watercolour, but sometimes, as with this one, I've added a little bit of gouache occasionally. Some of these images I'll also use later on in a larger watercolour. I did with this one. So I think we're coming to the end of my bunches of images. I'm glad you stayed with me for this, and I hope you've enjoyed my little preview of my watercolour journal images. That last image I've done a demo on, and I will post that very soon. Thank you for watching.